Hi, all. Welcome to the UEFA Dynasty League podcast. I'm your host, Eric of VFL Wolfsburg, and we have another episode for you. We're going to be doing a power rankings of Serie A. Our hope is that we can do all four. We have like 3 weeks to do it, so we'll see if we can get enough sessions in. Alongside me, we have Fred of Hercules, as usual. Fred, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Eric. It's been a long time since we've done this, so let's have some fun.
Hell yeah, absolutely. And from a remote location, and we're always remote, but a different location than usual, we have Mike of Udinese. Mike, how you doing tonight?
Just working on social distancing here. I wanted to make sure we were all in different states here, just to make sure we were safe and podcasting safely. Remember, guys, wrap it before you tap it.
Great advice as usual, Mike, and we'll see if that translates to the teams later. And lastly, we have Donnie or DK of Atalanta. How you doing tonight?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Sure, of course. And so we just to give everyone a little heads up, we have 6 people that did rankings for this podcast. The 4 of us, as long as our 2 other hosts that join us on most nights, Billy of Arsenal, and of course the co-commissioner Matt of Tottenham. And so we combined those 6, and we have our first power rankings. And we started with the Serie A because we always do them last, and they never get any coverage. So only fair enough that we start with them. Just a few league things. We did have our first waivers process. If you missed it, it's going to start next Wednesday. We're also going to decide before Wednesday if we're going to do anything extra with Corona opt-outs. Matt and I are going to work out those details. So stay tuned for that. We also have the official Europa bylaws that are going to be added. It's not much, but for teams that just missed out on qualifying for Champions League, you might qualify for that tournament, which is another way for you to get Champions League bid or win another prize. That will be announced. Maybe we'll do it for next podcast. That would be a good idea. But we're going to go ahead and get started with the power rankings. I'm going to put it up on the screen here. Oh, let's get everybody in on there. There we go. So we have the power rankings if everyone wants to see it. And we're going to start with number 12, and we're going to move our way up. So starting at number 12, we have Roma, who has completely went with the tank mentality after year 1. He has no QBs to start. Eason is the only notable QB unless he traded for one. Going to his running backs, he's got Swift and Michelle. So a promising rookie and a Michelle who's trying to work through some things. At receiver, he has a not-so-fortunate crew with N'Keal Harry, Pittman, and Ross. And at tight end, he has TJ Hawkinson. He also has Sternberger. So as you can tell, this team is really young. And, it's really just building for the future. Mike, I'm going to let you start off if you have any tips on him, because you're the only person that didn't rank him 12. You ranked him 11.
Yeah, and for transparency in terms of how the sausage was made, we did make these ranks a little while ago. So part of my higher rank had Darius Geis factoring in a little bit stronger for him this year. I don't know how much that's going to matter, but I just think in terms of starting potential, there's another team that is obviously in blow it up and build for the future mode. And I think Roma, again, like you said, if he does have a quarterback, is closer. And again, in terms of building for the future assets, he has Devies, he's got first. I just like the roster better. So even with guys gone, Michelle and Swift should give good points. Renfro looks to be in a good spot to contribute in the Oakland offense. I'm higher on Ross than most. Scott, I think, is going to be in a timeshare. I don't think it's going to be a full Sanders show. So I think, again, him not having a quarterback is really rough in this league, but I think he's still going to put up a few more points than people are thinking.
Well, let's not forget, he still has Alex Smith on his roster.
Right, and Alex Smith might have been still dead to me when I created this little list. So, he's certainly making the comeback. And as Mike elaborated, he's certainly built more for the future and maybe could be more ready this year if he did put that switch on. But these rankings are purely for the 2020 season. So, with 2 rebuilding teams, I don't think anyone would fault you. What else do you think about this team, Fred, other than Alex Smith?
Well, he has a couple of interesting talents that didn't get discussed. I don't know if you mentioned Boston Scott as his running back. He also has old ass Frank Gore, which I don't know if he just can't get rid of him at this point. No one will even give him a 4th round pick. But those are a couple of guys who are at least going to be putting up points on a week to week basis. They may not be winning games for him, but they'll be respectable in their roles.
Right. So, I mean, you were still scrapping the barrel, though. I don't think this team, unless they sold all their assets and their 10 Devi assets and whatever picks that they have, will compete this year.
Yeah, I don't think that's what he's trying to do. So it's all going according to plan, I guess.
Right. Donnie, do you have any special notes with any of these guys on Roma's roster?
Yeah, I guess I would say the interesting pieces for this that would be competitive this year. Obviously, the Geis hit was not ideal, but maybe for the strategy was ideal. But I think Dare Ogunbowale could be a sneaky asset this year with Tom Brady's preferences in Tampa Bay. So I'm thinking he could actually be a value running back there, serving that kind of James White role. I do like Boston Scott. Miles Sanders is apparently hurt again, so there's a couple assets that I kind of like for this year. And some of those, I mean, to play into a strategy, he could get a few weeks in. If some of them start to pop off without an expected long-term role, he could, kind of further that build into next year by trading those off. If, say, they drafted a bunch of receivers in Las Vegas, but Hunter's a second year in the system. If he starts popping off for the first few weeks, he could always move him and build up more for next year.
No, and Donnie makes a great point here in terms of those flip assets here. I honestly hadn't looked at the first time I saw. There's some dubious thoughts about Chris Thompson, DeAndre Washington. Both can end up being some strong contributors with Greenherd already. Auden Tate still has a path to relevance in Cincinnati. And Jay Sternberger is one of those sleeper tight ends that everyone's kind of grabbing as like tight end 14 or 15 in the best ball leagues I'm in. So it would be interesting to see, especially in a 16-team league, what that ends up being value-wise.
Certainly. Yeah, that's he is one of those teams that has so many future assets that he will be able to pivot whatever way he wants. He can sell those assets next year for more win now potential guys, or he can just do the full rebuild and try to go for that super stack team. Maybe go for that treble pot if it's built up. So he's really got some options in sacrificing this current year. But moving on, we have our 11th team who was universally 11th, except for Mike, who ranked him 12th, and that was Juventus, the Serie A champions of real life, not in this league. At QB, he's got Herbert. If you're watching Hard Knocks, he's looked okay so far, although they really just started padded practice. At running back, he's got nothing of note. I only have Hines, who is behind Taylor and Mack. At receiver, he's got some good options for a team this bottom of the table that we're expecting. Hollywood Brown, Judy, Rieger, Ruggs, Hardman. So a young core that he's hoping will get better. And lastly, he's got Jonnu Smith at tight end. So again, another really young team, clearly pivoted for the future, but according to all 6 of us, no real shot at going for it this year. We'll start with you this time, Donnie. What player do you really like or dislike on this roster?
Well, I mean, I think if I were to look at these teams again, as of right now, I may even consider putting this team last. I just think the running back situation there is obviously it's going to be tough to acquire a running back, and then there's nothing guaranteed at the start of the year in quarterback either. I'm not a huge fan of Justin Herbert. I know there's been some pretty accurate, some deep throws getting shown on Hard Knocks, but outside of that, I think that's probably Tyrod's job for most of the year, barring something crazy happening. As far as his receivers go, there's a couple of guys there that I definitely do like. I think Marquise Brown put on some weight. I think that serves his role well to stay in the game longer. I was concerned about his body size, honestly. So I think if he kept his speed and is running good, that could be solid. Tyreek's, could be hurt again, and with injuries there, Kelvin Harmon could possibly have a role this year. Van Jefferson is supposedly looking pretty good. Judy was a good pick. I'm kind of surprised at all the assets that got put into these like brand new receivers when there's no running backs on this team. I like several of them, but I'm kind of surprised there wasn't any investment in the future running back on the team.
Well, I think it may have to do with the draft picks that he held, or I don't know if he acquired these after the fact or just in our draft. But if you missed out on those first 6 or 8 picks, there weren't no running backs of note worth taking.
Right, and he was actively trading down. I think he had Edwards-Helaire. That's the one I have, and I think he was in range on Akers and traded out of that to pick up some upgrades so that he could get Judy Rager and Ruggs. I mean, it's a building team, obviously. Herbert has, again, may contribute this year, but may not. Bowden, I think, we'll see what that Oakland team ends up looking like. But those 6 receivers are not a bad way to start. The problem is, you don't want a lot of picks next year and a ton of receiver exposure this year, because next year the receivers are supposed to be even better. So it's kind of like, you know what, this is kind of the rough spot to be in, where they're still looking like some good receivers this year. But if next year's are better and I've got a bunch of picks next year, then I'm just going to end up with more receivers. So I agree. I think, packaging will make some sense at some point for this team. That's why I ventured out onto the limb and ranked them last at the moment, because I just don't. I think Roma is probably a year away from being relevant. I think Juventus is probably at least 2.
It really depends on if his quarterback hits, and beyond that, he has Devy quarterbacks, but those are multiple years down the road.
And Andrew Luck when he comes back.
It may happen before Justin Herbert becomes relevant.
This is true.
Yeah, that's for sure. And Donnie, I want to highlight one more thing you said where he didn't build any running back talent. And I guess my counterpoint to you would be, if you're not competing this year, you don't got a starting quarterback. You're clearly not going for the win. Take the guys you like, try to build that value, and then, go for a running back. I'm a big proponent of that myself. I'd rather, trust on more reliable receivers to build value than when you're going for the punch, going for those running backs that are more volatile but can make or break a championship season. But that's clearly the tier break. There's nothing really too much. We can go back and forth on those 2 teams, but they are the tankers, in our opinion. And we're going to move to our next tier, and it's going to start with one of our co-hosts. Udinese has been placed 10th. It was an average of 9.5, with me, Donnie, and Mike himself all ranking him 9, and Fred, Matt, and Billy ranking him 10. Mike, why don't you go ahead and break down your roster?
I get it. I mean, I'm very rookie heavy, and in the age of COVID, this is not the year that you want people who need training camp time and preseason to kind of get themselves acclimated to the league. So I get the ranking. I love my team, though. I think I've got a lot of opportunity for the future. I think we talk about needing running back depth. I think I've got that in spades with all 5 of the big running backs this year. So again, I love my team. I get that I may not be relevant this year, but I'm going to be scary as hell next year.
Yeah, and just for people that don't have Mike's team in front of him, he's got the 2 young quarterbacks in Burrow and Hoskins. Like he said, he's got pretty much the big 5 running backs that are rookies. He's also got OBJ and again, a bunch of rookie receivers, Lamb, Ayuk, Shenault. So, yeah, it's certainly in a much better spot for this year than the 2 guys we mentioned below, because you got a starting team that's going to put up points. I would just worry about consistency if you don't get a few breakout elites. We'll go next to Fred, who doesn't like the team as much as the rest of the 3 of us. And is there any particular reason why you have him below Parma?
Let me see what I've got here. So without looking at Parma in my view right now, I can't say for sure. I think I was thinking that this crop of rookie running backs was going to have a very difficult time acclimating and becoming starters right away. So that might put Mike well out of the running for this year, fairly early. I a couple of these guys have, since we did this ranking, they've gotten much better press. Obviously, Clyde Edwards-Helaire has basically been thrust into the starting role before training camp even started. So, he's one of the guys that will help him immediately. And the only problem I see with his roster is for him to try and figure out which of these rookies and which of these, group of players to play on a weekly basis.
Right. And look, I get it. And we'll talk about Parma next. Sorry, spoiler. But I understand why I would be ranked below him.
Yeah. Donnie, what do you have to add about Mike's team? Anything that sticks out to you?
I mean, if he's got every relevant running back out of this class, so even if two running backs from this class really hit, they're probably on this roster. I like the wide receivers that he drafted. Big fan of all of them except Ayuk, and I wasn't a fan of Ayuk, but since we drafted, everything has gone Ayuk's way. Every other receiver is just going on IR, getting hurt in the meantime. So that turned out really well. I mean, this team is frankly possibly a Carson Wentz injury away from being a real contender if Jalen Hurts all of a sudden was starting and he had two quarterbacks to start on a weekly basis, along with, one or two of 6 or 7 rookie running backs that he drafted hitting. So I think with that injury, if that were to happen, this could be a contending team.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we should note that this team is miles ahead of the former two. And upon re-ranking, he might even be higher just because, like you said, Edwards-Helaire is the starter and everyone's pumped about him. And, just having two QBs that are going to play, Haskins, I'm pretty sure, is still a starter, but at least Burrow, who's definitely going to play all the games if he's healthy, certainly makes your team a lot more consistent than a team with only one quarterback or none. But so Mike is, and just to let the viewers know, if you didn't realize, Mike was super tanky. That's how he got the top 5 running backs of this past class. So things are looking up, and I'm sure he's executing his plan to his desire. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't my plan on the outset, but it's worked out.
Yeah, this is a roster that we will be terrified of next year, or maybe for the next 5 years if some of these guys hit the way he wants them to.
Yes, 100%. And moving into the next team, which is Parma, he had an average of 9, so slightly above Mike, where Fred and Donnie actually had him at 8. And the lowest on Parma was me at 10, as well as Mike at 10. This is Bayer. He's a new owner in the league. And looking at his team real quickly, he's got Goff at QB, the only one really of note. At running back, he's got Barkley and Fournette, so nice 1-2 punch there. At receiver, he's got A.J. Green coming off the injury with Corey Davis, Mims, Ruggs rounding out that crew. At tight end, no real stud sticking out with Everett and Eifert at tight end. So let's start with you, Fred. You had him ranked 8. Why do you like this better than the other teams that were ranking around this area?
It's probably almost entirely due to Saquon Barkley. And if with the combination of Barkley, Fournette, he's got Goff. I'm going to give him credit for having Marcus Mariota, the future starter for the Raiders. It's just a matter of time, I think, on that one still. So he's going to have 2 quarterbacks. He's got one great running back and one solid running back if Fournette puts up a season similar to he had last year. And he's got, solid veteran talent, at the running back, or at the receiver and tight end positions. If a guy like Troutman starts flashing in this season, that's just a bonus for him.
Yeah, and Donnie, you also had him ranked 8. Is it the Saquon effect here?
Yeah, it's definitely just having a decent running back core to build off of. I know that the the team that I rank below them is a little bit better off at quarterback, but I think that could be addressed a little bit quicker than the other teams are going to be able to address the running back core like this team has.
Yeah. And Mike, you were one of the rankers that had him at 10, so we'll let you get the first descent here.
No, I mean, I think my team is better than this. So, again, that's why I have him 10. But I can understand it's Goff is a more of a known asset than Burrow. Barkley and Fournette are more known assets at running back than anything I have right now that are rookies. AJ Green, again, if he is not actually hurt, returning to form, I get that. Ruggs, again, he was the first receiver taken, so between those, that's probably a little bit more solid. Tight end, though, is just one of those that isn't a strong spot. So it really is Saquon or bust with this team, in my opinion. And I think from what we're going to expect for this season, a lot of folks hitting IR, a lot of things happening that we didn't expect, that depth is going to mean something, and this team doesn't really have any. So outside of Jake from State Farm stepping in and taking over for Josh Allen, I don't really see a second QB here because I really don't think Mariota takes Carr's job. In fact, I would almost bet he doesn't. But like I said, I think it's a team that has a few really strong assets and is lacking depth.
Yeah, and me ranking them the same way as you did, Mike. I think my really big concern here are the receivers. You have AJ Green, excuse me, that didn't play a snap last season, and that's really your only real shot at a starting receiver. I mean, sure, Mims and Ruggs might have some good weeks, but they're really not going to be putting up consistent points. So you're not going to be able to make up the QB and the receiver difference with just Barkley and Fournette. Not the jury is out on Fournette, but if he goes to another team where they already have a running back, his role is going to be much more limited. He's not going to have the workload, and I know he's not really thrilled in Jacksonville. So that still is a concern for me. I wouldn't want to build my team around that. So I don't know if he plans on making any moves for the season, but maybe this is just a wait and see for him coming out of the dispersal. But certainly if Barkley has an outstanding season, he can make a push for something. But moving on to our next team, which is Fiorentina, who's also out of the dispersal. They have a good QB situation with Brady and Tua. No running backs of those. Latavius Murray would be the starter, in my opinion. The receivers are looking pretty good. A.J. Brown leads Westbrook, Judy, Lamb, Mims. So, again, another team with really young receivers. And he's got Kittle at tight end, who is going to be his rock on this team. Looking at the rankers, 3 of us had him ranked at 7, and Donnie had him ranked at 10. So, Donnie, what's the big concern with this team? It's got to be the running backs, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the running backs I don't really like. I like a couple guys at other positions, but I just don't see, a competitive team, especially this year, out of a team that can't field a running back.
Right, and it's the zero running backs. It can work maybe a little better in a dynasty league where you only have to start 1, but I don't think that the QBs are going to be able to make up for that difference where the receivers are going to be put up average at best scores. Kittle will also help out a little bit, but I think his team is middling. I don't really think it's going to be an all-star team. Fred, Mike, what do you guys think?
Well, I'll jump in here. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. He's not a roster that looks like he's trying to compete this season anyway. I count something like a dozen rookies on his team, and some fairly high level ones, or highly sought after ones. So he's got players who are going to be coming into their own maybe next year, especially with the way everything was with this offseason. When it comes to his quarterbacks, he's got Brady and Trubisky, but I wouldn't be surprised if both of those players are off of his roster just a couple weeks into the season, because they don't fit what he's doing with the rest of it.
Right. It's going to be interesting to see which way he goes here because, as mentioned, he, much like I have kind of all of the rookie running backs you'd want outside of, I think it's maybe one or two, he's got like the top 6 or 7 rookie receivers. So, from a long term perspective, that could serve him well. But he could, if he grabbed one or two of those guys, turned them into a solid RB1 with Brady and the Chicago quarterback, those 2 running backs, his receiving core, and Kittle, that puts him in the Europa competition at least. So I think this is where we're starting to get to that realm of, a trade away from being relevant this year. But again, to Fred's point, you could just as easily be packaging Brady, Murray, or something of that sort to, pick up capital for the next year's draft.
Right. I think we've certainly entered the tier of, like a trade or two away if you have the young enough assets, or like two borderline with only win now assets. It's probably time to sell to rebuild to make that push, but certainly not title contenders in our opinion for this range. And that brings us to our next team, which is our team number. Where are we at? We are at team number 7, and it is one of our hosts, Atalanta, who is coming off a really unlucky season with his assets. If Donnie wants to elaborate, but it looks like we all have him around here at either 8 or 7 from our rankers, and he slots in at number 7 with a 7.5 average. Donnie, why don't you break down your team?
Yeah, I think I do think that Foles is going to win that job. So I think I'll have two quarterbacks to start. But I know that some people may disagree with that and think that Mitch is going to do well. I think Foles is probably the best quarterback that they've had around that team in a while. So I think he'll win that job. I already mentioned before kind of my thoughts on Jalen Hurts. I think there's a high likelihood that an injury could make him a starter. So I'm feeling good there. I felt better, obviously. Kind of show my cards that I'm a fan of having a strong running back core. I was really looking forward to Darius Geis. We're not that far removed, a couple injuries away from him being a pretty much consensus second pick behind Saquon Barkley. So I was really looking forward to that finally paying off after holding for so long. But I wouldn't be surprised if he remains a free agent until he goes to jail and we all drop him. So that kind of hurt for sure, but I still like having both running backs behind the Indy line, and I think something could be done there. I like Miles Sanders a lot. Lots of youth at wide receiver with a couple guys who kind of popped a little bit towards the end of last season, and then Juju who needs to rebound. So hopefully enough will happen there. Big fan of Jonnu Smith, but as I reflected on the draft, I probably could have grabbed another tight end a little bit higher than I grabbed Alberto, just to stock up there too.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and say that I love the running backs. I think Sanders is in line to take a jump this year. I don't know if he's an RB1, but I think he's going to be a top 15 guy for sure. My love for Jonathan Taylor is pretty well known across any league that I'm in. I like the rookie receivers he has mixed in with Juju and Galladay and some proven assets there. I think Jonnu is obviously primed to take that next jump. The reason I had him a little bit lower is because while I like his quarterbacks, there's, I think, a lot of risk at quarterback. Big Ben's this year and then has a $40 million cap hit next year, so it could be done. And I kind of don't think the Steelers are going to be as good as everyone thinks they're going to be. So I could see that going bad in a hurry. Foles, I think he's kind of in that Flacco mold right now, where he kind of had 6 really good games, and that got him paid, and now he's kind of floundering to end his career. I really love Jalen Hurts. That's why I've got him on my team as well. But he's got some distance from being a starter. So I think he's really got one reliable starter, one maybe starter, and one injury away starter at quarterback. So without really, a strong number 1 there, I can't rank him much higher, especially in Superflex.
Right. And the one thing I would add is that you have the Big Ben and Juju stack, Donnie, and that to me is going to make or break your season. And I don't think you're still a title contender with this team quite yet. But if they really bash off, I think you're going to be right in the running in that, second through fourth, because you definitely have the backbone where if Big Ben, has one of those Hall of Fame type seasons, which he's put up before, and Juju gets back to form, I think this team could be pretty damn dangerous.
And I am actually been going back and forth the last couple of days in a trade to get another quarterback on this team that I really like without giving up assets that I'm super attached to. So I think I'll be bolstering that here in the next couple of days too.
That would make a big difference for this roster if you're able to do that and turn it into a real super flex, team. That's the piece that's missing in terms of roster construction. I like the way he's got young talent. I like the way he's got young players mixed in with guys who haven't taken that step, mixed in with guys who have. And he has that at both running back and wide receiver.
Yeah. So moving on to the teams that we have ranked higher, we'll start with the number 16 Genoa, who is coming off a great season, a deep Champions League run the last season. The average of 5.34 with Matt, the highest ranker at 3. The rest of us had him ranked at either 5 or 6. Looking at a brief look at his roster here, he's got Russell Wilson and Baker Mayfield, also Teddy Bridgewater. So 3 QBs that will be starting and should play significant roles. Dalvin Cook, who certainly looks much better now that we know he's not holding out for this season, and Mac, who right now looks to be the starter at least for Indianapolis. You got Michael Thomas, probably the best receiver in the league right now, with not too much depth. I have Curtis Samuel and Brown of note. Brown might be taking a step down in Buffalo. And Gronk at tight end, who Bruce Arians was just talking up, but Bruce Arians talks about every single one of his players and usually doesn't mean anything. But, this certainly seems like a team that will be trying to get into the Champions League. Maybe has a title aspiration, but we have them fighting for the qualifying round. Why don't you give us a start here, Fred? What do you think about Genoa that's going to make or break his season?
I think his receivers are going to make or break his season. Looking at what he's got right now beyond Michael Thomas, it's a bunch of question marks. People wonder about Curtis Samuel, and he's got John Brown, and then what? I don't know that you can count on Curtis Samuel and John Brown on a weekly basis. So he's got to make up those points at another position. He's got a couple good running backs, and he's got solid superflex quarterbacks with either injury or bye week replacement depth. So that's fantastic. But I don't see him fleshing out the rest of his roster the way some of the higher teams will be able to on a weekly basis.
Yeah, this is not a Champions League team. The more I look at it, the less I like it. I also would not be surprised if this was the team that Donnie was talking to try and get a quarterback. He's got his 3 quarterbacks, but then it's bleak. I mean, he's got his 3 quarterbacks in Thomas. Cook, yes, he's not holding out, but he doesn't have a deal. And nobody would announce a holdout right now anyway, because the new CBA says basically you have to show up for a certain number of camp practices or else you don't get an eligible season. And I don't think Cook's hit that yet. So I would not be surprised if Cook says, great, you didn't want to sign me? I'm going to take myself and get myself through this point of the preseason, and then I'm gone. At which point he'd have his 3 quarterbacks and Michael Thomas. Oh, and Gronk. But the more I look at this team, the more I think I've got them ranked too high, even though I can't necessarily find a team below them that I'd necessarily move up. So they need to move a quarterback. It probably should be Russ, and it probably should be for as many pieces that could start for him as possible, because especially with our starting requirements, he's just not there. So, barring a major trade, I don't see this team being a Champions League competitor. And I mean, hot take, he might not even be a Europa League competitor.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I do think he has a sneaky starter in Olabisi. I think he could be relevant this year. He thrived pretty well in that system towards the end of last year. I think it all really depends on if this, rookie wide receiver coronavirus impact is, more towards the heavy end of how people are talking, or more towards the light end. And if Jefferson comes in right away and lights the world on fire and can be a starter, great. But if he, a lot of times even high draft pick receivers struggle a bit their first year. And if that's the case with Jefferson, I mean, Olabisi could be an automatic starter for him too. Outside of that, I pretty much agree with everything that you guys said.
If it's not Jefferson starting regularly for Minnesota, do you think the second wide receiver there is even going to be relevant?
Yeah, I think so. I think he had some games like that last year too, even with both the alphas there. So I think it's definitely still possible. I don't think it's a wide receiver one or anything like that, but definitely somebody that he could start.
Well, and that's the thing. If you look at that Minnesota defense too, they lost some very key contributors. So they're going to be in a lot more negative game script this year. It's not going to be them, playing a strong defense and running the ball and grinding games out. They're going to have to actually score some points this year. So as much as everyone looks at them and says, yep, 2 tight end, run the ball, pound the ball control. If you can't stop the other team from scoring, that's going to be a lot more difficult.
Right. And I think Donnie brings up a good point, because this roster really is studs and duds. If you get rid of the QB depth, he's relying on Cook at running back, and he's relying on Thomas at receiver. If they put up the elite numbers that we expect they will, he really only needs flex players that are, have decent roles on their team. And as long as he can carve out a few of those, this team will be contending. I don't think it will be enough, but if one or two of them surprise us, I think we're looking at this roster and we're like, damn, it's pretty damn good. So while it might not be sustainable with injuries and for the future, I think they could surprise us a little more than we're giving them credit for. But as we rank Genoa, they're pretty much middle table here. And that brings us to our next middle table team, which we all pretty much agreed is the fifth. At 4.84 average, and that is Inter Milan. I had him ranked the highest at 3, and a few Mike and Matt had him ranked at 6. That is the lowest. If we're looking at his roster here, another Russell Wilson with Minshew and Cam at quarterback. At running back, we have Mixon and Coleman. And at receiver, he's got quite a few options: Diggs, Landry, Devontae Parker, Marvin Jones, Jefferson Sanu, rounding out the receiver crew. And at tight end, he's got Noah Fant and Jared Cook. So looking at this team, I'll start with the analysis, because I had him ranked the highest. And I think it's really the receiver depth. One guy sits out, he's still got another 4 or 5 guys that are going to step in. They're going to give him good points every week. He's probably a team that's going to be starting 4 receivers every week. And I think that can certainly work with the receivers he has. Landry and Jones are so consistent every year. Parker had a tremendous season after everyone pretty much gave up on him. Diggs could do well in Buffalo. That remains to be seen. But if he could put up numbers like he did in Minnesota, I think that, along with 2 quarterbacks, including Russell Wilson and Joe Mixon, I think this team really can compete. Why do you guys not see this as a Champions League team automatically?
I'd like to see a second running back, and I don't have a lot of faith that he's going to get hardly any points out of his tight end group. I think he's going to you could easily find a situation where he starts Noah Fant one week, and that's the week Jared Cook goes off, and vice versa. I think that's going to be a struggle there. I agree with you that the quarterback depth is great, wide receiver depth is great. Huge fan of Joe Mixon. I think he's up for a boom year, but then like who else to get points out of that? You got to roster one, right? So on his off week, or if he gets hurt, the team's going to really struggle there, and I don't like the tight end group.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is going to be a team that gets a lot of draws. I think the quarterback group is solid. I think if like Donnie said, if he picks the right tight end, he's going to get some good points there. I'm counting 6 wide receivers I'd be comfortable starting in this format. It's just a matter of, can Coleman get enough touches in the 49er backfield to be relevant, or can McFarland climb up the Steeler depth chart fast enough to give him that second running back? Like I said, this just seems like one of those teams that's going to be mid-table, but one of those that I just don't want to play because I could see them, 2 of these receivers go off in a week, and he's going to be putting up in a good number of points. So, it's not a competitor in terms of Champions League, but not a fun team to play.
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned his tight end group is probably his weakness here, but I think the perception is that's the easiest thing to fix, right? If he was having a good season, if he's getting, the week-to-week production from guys like Landry and Jones, and then the breakout production here and there from Diggs or someone else, he can make some moves here and fix his holes.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's why we have him ranked so high at 5 as a group, and I'll say this about Serie A, and I'm not trying to rip on because there are some really good teams in here, but there certainly is more diversity among the teams in terms of how they're going to perform this year, especially with 2 tankers, where you're only a few important games away from making or breaking your season, because you look at any of the rosters we're talking about now, Roma and Juventus is almost an automatic win for these teams, and then you go to Udinese and Parma, and you should beat those teams if you're a good team, unless they have a crazy week. So when we go through other leagues, I think there's going to be more parity among the teams where it might be harder, but as long as he's got that consistent receiver depth, I really think that's why this team's going to pull through this year, and that's why I have him ranked as high as 3. All right. Well, now that we've talked about Inter Milan, we're approaching who, as a group, who we have in the Champions League out of spots for the upcoming season, and we'll start with number 4, and that is Venezia, who's ranked as an average of 3.67. Looking at our rosters, our rankers, Fred has him the highest as ranked number 2, and Matt has him lowest at ranked number 5. If we take a quick look at his roster here, he's got Mahomes and Watson at QB, probably one of the deadliest QB combos we have in UEFA. Looking at running back, he's got Eckler, who was absolutely superb last year. Cohen is his RB2, so I didn't really have anyone of note as a second RB. Looking at receivers, he's got Adam Thielen, who's the de facto number 1 receiver over there in Minnesota, and Scary Terry McLaurin, who had a great season despite a horrible Washington season. So he certainly looks to improve this year, and I think everyone expects it. Also, Emmanuel Sanders is a veteran flex play there. His tight end is Mark Andrews, and he's also got Hurst, so tight end depth is also really great. So, this is certainly a team that we have in the Champions League. And Fred, we'll start with you, since you seem to have him as a title contender, actually ranked 2nd.
Yeah, and I'm beginning to question that right now, because I don't like his depth as much as maybe I did earlier this summer. I'm looking at his roster, and I only see 7 starters that I would be comfortable with. I don't actually see his flex play right now, which could be a problem. He's got some options, but we need to wait and see whether Thielen and Sanders get back to the level that we want them to be at. Beyond Austin Eckler, he has really nothing of note at running back, unless something happens between now and opening day. I love his quarterbacks, and maybe I just loved them a little too much when I was making my rankings. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, it's a classic hand build. Solidify the quarterback position, and turn the running back and receiver position until you kind of get what you like. And of course, represent Ohio State and Michigan as much as humanly possible. Yeah, he's got the two quarterbacks. I think Haskins is a solid third quarterback for him. He's got a lot of injury away guys, so that's one of the things that makes me like this team better than I probably should. I think Cohen and Eckler are a good 1-2 punch, but Harris has been getting a lot of activity in New England. Homer showed out well when he got the chance last year. Pollard is probably, if not the most important handcuff this year, one of the most. Jeff Wilson looks like he's going to get some more activity with Breida gone. Trevion Williams is probably the direct handcuff to Mixon, in my opinion. So, he's got a lot of guys who are one injury away, so he just needs something to happen to give him that, last bit of security. Or, he has Julian Fleming sitting there on his taxi squad, who, again, he's probably not going to because he's an Ohio State homer. He trades him away, he gets the running back he needs, and he's, solidified himself in the Champions League.
I had a similar reaction that Fred did when I first looked at this roster. Like what was I thinking? So while Fred was talking about it, actually went and looked at the transactions to see what piece might have left between ranking and now. And the only piece that is missing from this team from when we ranked it is Kiki Cutie. So unless me and Fred are really high on him, I think we just, taking another look at the team must have just really, at the time, really liked the quarterback stack. That's a dominant starting play there when you've got Mahomes and Watson in the super flex. That could carry you, halfway to a win right there.
Yeah, you're looking at 15 points over a team starting two QBs that are middle of the pack, and you're looking at 40 points over teams with one QB maybe. The points are going to stack up for him at QB, and I think Fred or Mike was saying, if you could patch it together, you could certainly make it work and build a winning team.
Yeah, so we haven't mentioned Mark Andrews at all, and solid there. So again, you're right, Eric. That's the theme of this division. No team looks bulletproof.
Well, not that we've seen so far, certainly.
Yeah. We started from the bottom, we're moving up. And so moving on to our number 3 team, we have as a consensus Napoli ranked as the 3rd team with an average of 3.34, just beating out that Venezia team. Looking at the rankers, we had Matt, Mike, and Billy rank them at 2. Eric and Fred ranked them at 5, and Donnie ranked them at 4. So little different disagreement. None of us actually ranked them 3rd where he finished, but certainly some have him as the runner-up, and some have him more as a mid-table team. Just looking at his team briefly, he's got Mayfield at Darnold at QB spots. He's got Melvin Gordon and Kenyon Drake at the running back spots. Kenyon Drake coming off a great bounce-back year for him going to Arizona. Looking at his receivers, it certainly seems like it's his strong area. Tyreek Hill, DJ Moore, DJ Chark, Williams, who I don't know which Williams that is looking at this, and Johnson. Jeez, I should really write the first names. And also Ertz at tight end, which is certainly a plus for him there. Why don't we start with someone that ranked them number 2? Mike, why don't you go ahead and get us started on Napoli?
Yeah, you gotta hit everything on the head there. I think he's got good running back options, 2 good quarterback options, 1 elite tight ends, and a ton of receiver depth. When you're talking Tyreek, DJ Chark, DJ Moore, as your top three, that makes up for a good number of sins. And frankly, with Paris Campbell, with Sammy Watkins, Mike Williams, I think he's got a couple of folks who, again, any of those as a wide receiver 4 is going to be a competitive advantage. So I think he's just pretty well situated. Again, I think Darnold needs to take that step forward, or else he's got a big question this year and into next. Otherwise, it's going to be tough to see this team miss the Champions League.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference to me, and just to give the counterpoint, as somebody who was lower on this team, Darnold and Baker or Mahomes and Watson. That's the biggest difference to me. The rest of the roster kind of cancels each other out when you compare these two specifically. I'm not seeing. Well, I can see the rest of his roster propping up his quarterbacks as opposed to his quarterbacks leading the rest of the roster.
I'm sorry. I need to jump in here. So wait, the difference is Darnold and Baker versus Mahomes and Watson. The rest of the roster cancels itself out with Venezia. Show your work.
Well, they both have a top tight end.
Yep.
I think the running backs for Napoli are better than the running backs for Venezia, but the receivers for Venezia are deeper than the receivers for Napoli.
How? So the receiver 1 for Napoli is Tyreek Hill versus Adam Thielen. The receiver 2 for
historically,
Napoli
that hasn't been that big of a difference between them.
The receiver 2 for Napoli
and there's no digs
is DJ
there.
Moore versus Terry McLaurin. The receiver 3 for Napoli is DJ Chark versus Kendrick Bourne.
Like I said, well, I'm sorry. Yeah. So, right. So the receivers and running backs for Napoli make up for his problem, or will try to make up for his problem at quarterback.
Fair enough. Sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I kind of
I see what you're saying. I said it with a wash earlier, and it's not, but I don't think they're that far off. The running backs will make a big difference for Napoli over the running backs that Venezia has.
Yeah, I tend to agree with the original point that Fred made there, and I get it. The wide receivers are stronger on this team, but there's a top flight tight end with backups available on either team. The wide receivers are definitely stronger here in Napoli. I don't particularly love the running backs on this team, though. I mean, there's no guarantee any of these running backs are the starter for their team all that far in. Yes, Melvin Gordon's a good talent, but there's also Philip Lindsay there, and I'm not a big believer in Kenyon Drake. I think he could be easily outplayed by Chase Edmonds. I mean, Chase Edmonds outplayed David Johnson last year, and they showed no favoritism to David Johnson. They played Chase Edmonds and somebody else towards the end of the year. They did the same thing with Kenyon Drake. So I think if Edmonds comes back healthy and plays strong, there's no guarantee that Kenyon Drake is the starter. So I think that's where, to me, after quarterback, their rosters do kind of balance out.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Donnie. And I think one thing that Napoli certainly would like to go in is like another stud other than Tyreek Hill, who has missed games, and Ertz as well. I think that if you want to win a title, you need more than these guys that are behind them, either a QB or the depth, the running back or the depth receivers. You can see a few of them falling off, and you look at the team and you're like, I don't know anymore. So it's really, if he had a stud running back, I think we'd all be looking at this like title contender 100%. But one piece away, certainly, from being a favorite, in my opinion. But let's move on to the number 2 team, clocking in number 2, AC Milan, who was an average rank of 2.67. Donnie here has him ranked as his number 1 team, and Matt was the lowest ranker at 4. He's another team with great quarterback depth: Matt Ryan, Big Ben, and Bridgewater. Running backs, 2 big studs, and Mixon and Derrick Henry. Looking at his receivers, DeAndre Hopkins, Allen Robinson, Julian Edelman, rounding out that crew. And he's got Higbee and Witten at tight end. So, Donnie, why is this team winning Serie A this year?
I just like the team top to bottom. A lot of options at quarterback. I mean, all 4 of them could be starters in the league, and 3 of them are. So I think really strong there. Having Mixon and Henry both at the top of your running back depth chart, I think is great. Don't love everything behind them, obviously, but Zach Moss is promising, so there's at least some rookie upside down there. Boston Scott, I kind of like to a lesser degree, so there's something to like inside the depth there. Little bit shaky on wide receiver once you get past Hopkins and Robinson. Deontay Johnson, I mean, he could end up being the star of that team, the star wide receiver of that team again this year. I mean, he showed some promise as a rookie, so that's solid. If age doesn't get Julian Edelman, there's some potential there to have him still be a starter with Cam there. And I like the tight end, so I like just everything about this team, starting with the quarterbacks all the way down.
Yeah. It's certainly a great team, and all of our rankers think that. But we'll go to Fred here, who has him ranked 3. And Fred, what's your biggest concern that has him favored to not win the Serie A, in your opinion?
I think we love to see stud running backs, and he's got 2 of the top ones in the league. And the problem I think I have with it is that he doesn't have the, I don't know. His 3rd is still pretty highly ranked. One thing I'm seeing here with his roster that is lacking is his tight end. He's got marginal starters at best. I think we can hope that Ian Thomas is his regular starter. But
or Higbee.
Yeah, okay, it could be Higbee. I'm just concerned that Rams is basically going to be a 50-50 split as long as they're both healthy. So yeah, I think I own Higbee myself, so I'm thinking, do I really like him that much, or am I trying to find a replacement or depth there as well?
No, and I mean, to your point, Fred, we're at the point in the rankings where we're picking nits. Like, we're not talking about missing the 4th or 5th starter in your team. We're talking about missing the 7th or 8th. And that's what I see when I look at this team. I think he's got 2 good quarterbacks. He's got two good options at running back. He's got 2 good options at receiver. And I think, you could be comfortable with your tight end position here. It's just, who's my last flex on this team? Is it Edelman? Is it Kenny Golden? Is it Bourne? And I don't think if you're starting any of those guys, you're really a title contender. Could you win Serie A? Maybe. But I don't think you're really going to be pushing for the overall title with that as your last flex spot. So I think, I know I'm broken record on this one. I think they're, again, a trade away from being that title contender. But considering what they've already given up to put this team together, I don't know what that piece is that you give up to get that last flex spot. Is it, selling, if the Deontay Johnson hype is still there, is it selling that for, a stronger receiver? Is it, moving Zach Moss to another owner, say a Singletary owner for, I don't know, an out of favor, but still RB2. There's another move that needs to be made here to make this team a title contender, in my opinion. So I think they're just off. I think they're champions contenders, but I think you have to pick nits when you're talking about title contenders, and I just can't talk myself into an eighth player on this roster.
Yeah, and Mike, just to counterpoint you here, and I did have him ranked second. I was the second highest ranker amongst everyone here. I would put up his 7 against any of the 7 in the other ones, and I'd almost always prefer him. So if you're gonna lose a spot right now in you're playing another team, what's the spot that's going to be your weakness? You want it to be that 8th spot because traditionally they're going to score the least on your team. So I think with 2 solid QBs and 2 stud running backs, he's going to put up plenty of points, enough to beat even good teams. I'm not sure where he finished if he's in Champions League this year, but I certainly think he'd be feared across the league. And I mean, DeAndre Hopkins and Al Robinson at receiver are just tremendous too. So I mean, just across the board, when you have those solid starters, the flex, you can plug and play. Half the time you get lucky, half you don't. You're looking just as strong as another team. So that's why I really do like this team, because that 8th spot is the easiest to plug for sure.
And he's got some options there of guys on his bench that could take over that flex role permanently if there's an injury and Boston Scott becomes the lead running back in Philadelphia, or Deontay Johnson shows out and Pittsburgh's offense becomes what it was a couple years ago. Then he's set. I mean, and it's super competitive.
Yeah. Well, we have one team left, and if you've been counting them, you know what team's left, and you probably do know because his roster is tremendous. Probably one of my favorites in UEFA, and that is Sassuolo. All the rankers have him ranked as the title favorite, except for Donnie, who has him ranked as the runner-up. So I mean, we're all right there. That's an average of 1.17, almost unanimous on his roster. And looking at it, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, and Minshew at quarterback. At running back, you have Aaron Jones, Fournette, Singletary, Swift. At receiver, you have Julio Jones, Keenan Allen, Stephon Diggs, Tyler Lockett. And at tight end, you have Mike Gesicki, who is getting raved at in training camp right now, and Dallas Goedert as well. So, I mean, you look at this roster, there's no weak points. There's studs all over. There's great depth. This is a roster where if someone said, hey, I have this orphan, you want to check it out, you would automatically take it over because you know that this team is going to be a top team. Who else wants to gush about this roster and how you wish you had it?
So this is my counterpoint to the AC Milan roster. So I would put those quarterbacks. I'd put Jones and Fournette up against those running backs. I'd put Allen, Julio, Lockett, and Diggs, and even Jameson Crowder. That depth, while he may not have the high-end upside that Hopkins has, I think, that is a much stronger receiver core. And from a tight end perspective, Goddard and Gesicki is a better 1-2 punch at tight end than anything there. So I think this is the unquestioned favorite. And beyond all of that, if anything goes wrong with this team, they have the ability to deal or put in, if he turns out to be what he is, DeAndre Swift. Like, that's something that none of these other top teams have, is a high-end asset who's a rookie that is going to appreciate value, that if I am looking for a title and I wanted to get DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, someone of that sort. Now, you wouldn't be able to get them straight up for DeAndre Swift, but you add Swift to any of his receivers, and that deal's going to go down. So it's one of those where I mentioned being a trade away. Like, this team is literally good enough, but if he needs to pull the trigger to get that extra trade, to get the ammo to actually win the league, he's got the ammo to do it. And I think a lot of these other teams up here who have traded first and traded youth and stuff like that don't exactly have the pieces to do something like that. So I think this is the unquestioned best team in the league.
Yeah, this is a roster that, unless something weird happens and he gets screwed over in head-to-head battles over and over again throughout the season, we would expect them to be on top of their league, their division, all year long.
I'm not as confident on, and it's not, we've talked about it a couple of times. It's not the most crucial position here and a pretty easy one to fix, but I'm not nearly as confident in the tight end group here. Goddard is still the second fiddle to Ertz on that team until they do something with Ertz. And if Gesicki doesn't pan out, then this team has got a hole in the roster. There's Aaron Jones and Fournette. Both of them have had, some injuries in their history. And if something happens there, I don't like much of a starter this year behind them. I do like that they have Swift on the roster. And I think out of all the rookie running backs, Swift is one of the, highest likely besides CEH to be a starter early in the season for that team. So I think just a couple of I feel a little bit better about some of the backups at the other positions. I like the quarterback group better. I like the tight end group better. I like the running back group better personally. I do like the wide receivers on this team. I think they've got some easy set starts here, and I could see arguments for both these top two teams.
Yeah, for sure. And you have him as a runner-up, Donnie. You certainly appreciate the roster too. So despite that opinion, he still is a clear favorite. But so I think that pretty much wraps up our Serie A power rankings. Just for anyone that's listening now that may have missed the beginning of the podcast, number 1 is Sassuolo, 2 is AC Milan, 3 is Napoli, 4 is Venezia, 5 is Inter Milan, 6 is Genoa, 7 is Atalanta, 8 is Fiorentina, 9 is Parma Calcio, 10 is Udinese, 11 Juventus, and we have Roma at the bottom at 12. Again, this was the 6 of us regular podcast hosters ranking these teams probably in late June. To conclude, I'll just give anyone a chance that reviewing this or things changing. Is there any roster that you would probably change if you redid it? And I'll start off by actually including your team, Mike. I think Edwards-Helaire has certainly rose up my redraft ranking so much to the point where you have this running back that can anchor your team, and you have OBJ bounce back, or you have Burrow be a top 10 QB this year, and you have a team that's competing for a qualifying spot in Champions League. So looking at this roster, I might even move it up a little bit. And Mike, I'll pass it on to you. Is there any other team you would change if you redid it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and again, I think DK's team, Donnie's team, is one I'm moving up. Again, especially considering what's in front of them and what he's got at. Again, if he adds that second quarterback, especially without losing anything of major importance, then Edwards is getting run with the ones. Campbell's showing out in camp. Like, he's got the depth at receiver if he moves that, and still has Sanders and Taylor. I think that's a Champions League team also. So it's one of those where at first I kind of dinged him heavily for the quarterback position, but as long as he's got one, especially in terms of what's in front of him in Serie A, I think he's in the hunt.
Yeah, it's certainly it's certainly one that can go either way. And Fred, how about you? Any second thoughts on these rosters now that we reviewed them again?
Yeah, I think looking back, I might flip flop AC Milan and Napoli, just because of some of the depth that Napoli has over. Or I'm sorry, which one? Yeah, I'm sorry, the depth that AC Milan has. I think I had them ranked a little bit lower than the consensus.
Okay, and Donnie, we'll end off you. What's your difference now that we reviewed them again?
Yeah, I think this is more just seeing how things have played out since the draft. Mike's got such a rookie heavy team, and I mean every single rookie that he drafted besides maybe Jacob Eason, has had some like super positive thing happen, whether it be, the 49ers, every other receiver getting hurt, or, the running backs, all just having really good landing spots. Antonio Gibson has a shot now with Geis getting arrested. AJ Dillon's got tree trunks for legs that's going viral. Everybody on his team is popping. He only picked up a couple of wide receivers, and obviously CeeDee Lamb is just a stud. And Ayuk's got the 49er stuff going on. So I mean, just every pick in this rookie draft seems to be pointing up. So I think that's why I would move him up, because there's a lot of positivity on his draft picks.
Yeah. Certainly, yeah. I think Mike might go up a few spots if me and you are both moving him up. So Mike certainly loves to hear that. But I think that's going to do it here for us on the UEFA Dynasty podcast. If you guys have any comments on where we rank guys, if you think you should have been ranked higher, or you have a roster that you think we're sleeping on, please let us know in the group me. I'm also going to be posting these power rankings to the message board, so you can start the combo there. Like I said, we're going to be talking more about Corona rules that we may revise now that we're approaching the season. It looks like it could still be a problem, which Matt and I wanted to see what the temperature was, and it's certainly still hot. So we might make some additional room to make things easier for owners. Europa League is going to be officially announced, so that's something to look forward to, especially if your team isn't one of the top teams, something to keep an eye out on. Does anyone have any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
I'm just happy to be talking football again. I mean, there's been so much uncertainty about everything. It's, the last couple of seasons we've been thinking the heat of preseason at this point. So the fact that we don't have that, we are just now getting to training camp news. It's kind of nice to have some sense of normalcy when it comes to the season.
Yeah, I've been getting my fix with HBO's Hard Knocks, and I'm honestly very impressed with the protocols and procedures that the league has put in place, and that there hasn't been a major outbreak or a team reporting that they have to shut things down yet anywhere in the league yet. And considering the number of people involved, I think that's very impressive. I was very pessimistic about the league, the season completing, and beyond that, I think I was probably 50-50 on the league not even playing this year. But right now, everything looks great, and I'm excited to be, watching news reports and all the normal training camp things that we see on a daily basis right now. It's almost like things are back to normal in some small way.
Yeah, I'd agree. I was going to make the same point. It's really promising that, we've had the walkthroughs going for a while, and now we're in at least several days now of helmets and shorts, and then pads layered in with some contact going. And to the worst thing that I had heard so far was the Bills having to do a remote day in one of their rooms because somebody had tested positive, and I think it turned out it was a false negative anyway. So for that to be the worst news that we've heard so far, with over 30 teams out there getting together, I mean, baseball, an entire team imploded in the same time frame of them getting together. So definitely really promising, and can't wait for the season to get kicked off here in a few weeks.
Yeah, certainly. I hope everyone is staying healthy. That's a good point. If anyone ever has any issues, please let us know. But yeah, we know it's a tough time for a lot of people out there. So please stay healthy and stay safe. And stay employed if you can. So we're certainly with all of us in the efforts to stay healthy. And one more thing I'd like to throw out: if you're interested in ranking the teams, we're going to be doing the Bundesliga next. So go ahead and shoot me your ranking, and we'll include it in there. That's no problem at all. But for Mike, Fred, and Donnie,
Did Eric just freeze?
Something weird has
I think
just
he
happened.
froze.
Yeah, that's.
Eric
I think
just
he
froze.
was